Meeting to order, and ask Mrs. Bass to please take the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn.
Here.
District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill. Here. District 4, Erica Whitfield.
Here.
District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Let the record show we have a quorum. Please stand for the pledge. Today will be led by Mr. Mark Mitchell from our HR department. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. So today, just so the public's aware of our agenda, we have our special meeting first today, and then the board will have a couple closed sessions, an attorney-client session, and a risk management session, and then some workshops later this afternoon. So at this time, need to make two really special announcements. The first one is, if you will look at the front of the dais at Mrs. Brill's spot, you'll see a birthday cupcake. So last week was her birthday, and we wish her a very belated happy birthday. And this evening at the Heart Ball, our own school board member, Mrs. Whitfield, will receive the Heart of Palm Beach Award from the American Heart Association. This award is given to community members who have gone above and beyond to advance the mission of the American Heart Association. And that is being held at the Kravis Center tonight. So Mrs. Whitfield will be at the Breakers, sorry about that, this evening. So Mrs. Whitfield is being recognized specifically for her efforts to integrate CPR training for students in our school. And she'll have to leave a little bit early if we're not already done for that. So Mrs. Whitfield, congratulations. That was a tremendous honor. All right, my computer just timed out. So what's the first item?
Call to order. You've already taken roll, so.
Is there, Dr. Vos, anything to add?
We have nothing to add, nothing for good
withdraw?
cause, and nothing to withdraw.
Right.
No items pulled, so you just need to vote on the agenda.
Right. And Mark, will you please come up? My computer is not behaving. So is there a motion to, well, I think the first thing we need to do is there anybody want to pull anything from consent? We only have one item. If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda as published? Motion by Mrs. Brill, second by Mr. Barbieri. Second, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Disclosures?
Speakers.
Come up. Can I borrow your microphone? Little technical problem here. So we'll go to speakers. We have a few speakers. When I call your name, please come forward. And our first, Justin Katz and Michael DeBach. Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon. Obviously, I'm here today to talk about the topic of the day, and I'll just kind of give a couple of brief bits of input from myself and the Classroom Teachers Association, and I'll be quick about it. One, we would urge you in your discussion today with regards to the upcoming vacant position not to act today in the selection of either an interim or a full-time replacement because of the nature of the timing and how quickly things have evolved. We just, as an association, we feel like while there is importance on a smooth and quick transition, that the haste would not be, the prudent route to go. So again, we urge you not to make any sort of actual personnel decision today regarding the position. In terms of time, obviously, we'd like to see it move smoothly, but you have a good chunk of time given the advance notice. So that's where we stand with regards to that. The discussion, or I guess the big issue, has been internal versus an external search. Through a board meeting at the Classroom Teachers Association on Monday night, the position of the CTA as an association is to stick with an internal candidate for a variety of reasons, but the simplest would be that we feel like a foundation has been set in place to have a search, an expense, new personnel come in from the outside. We just feel like it would disrupt what's been put in place, which we are happy with. We don't want to see reshuffling of the deck chairs to the point that they all get jammed together and there's a big stack and no one knows what's going on. The topic of salary potentially will come up for whoever comes in the position. I'm not overly concerned and have no interest in expressing a thought on that, but what I would like to make sure is that whoever potentially comes in the position, in the most recent collective bargaining agreement negotiated with the CTA, we created a salary compression committee with members of the CTA and members of the district. That was at the advice of the district to acknowledge what we've all acknowledged, that salary compression for teachers has become a serious concern and has been for a while. Through this committee and our preliminary discussions, everyone has been very enthusiastic about finding in good faith solutions to this problem. The superintendent, chief amongst them, knows that this is extremely important for recruiting and retaining the quality teachers that we have. So anyone who fills that position has to be 100% committed to allowing that committee to continue doing its work, and ultimately whatever decision that committee comes to, obviously with the guidance of whoever is in that position moving forward, they need to be on board with that. If someone were to come into that position and have a problem with the objective and the potential plans of that committee, that would be a serious concern for the teachers. So someone has to be supportive of those actions or those potential actions. And then obviously, I feel like in the past couple weeks, all of you have found out you have a lot of new friends. Everyone's been, self-included, although I consider all of you to be friends of mine for the past 4 or 5 years at least. Everyone has been throwing their thoughts around. I just want to make sure that outside of the parents themselves, that the employees of the school district and their opinions, not just the teachers, but the employees in the schools, in other facilities, principals, administrators in the schools district, that the opinions of the existing staff have to be taken as seriously as possible, because the harmony or the ability for every different unit to work together is what makes this district operate. So I would ask that, again, in not making a decision today, that you allow enough time to gather the information that you need from the various units at the district so that you know exactly where they stand, because again, to me, the employees and their ability to do their job and what they feel is going to be arguably the most important perspective beyond your own. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Michael DeBach, welcome to the Palm Beach County School Board. For anybody in the public who doesn't know, Mr. DeBach is the new leader of the Economic Council of Palm Beach County, so welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Shaw, members of the school board, Superintendent Avosa. Happy Valentine's Day. If you'll notice that Justin Katz and I shop at the same store, because our Valentine's Days ties are exactly the same. It's an honor always to come in front of you. The business community is a strong advocate of this school system, always has been and always will be. The change that's upon us is untimely, but it is the time for us to focus with extraordinarily great deliberacy and intention. As we move forward through a transition process, transition is never easy for any organization, particularly one of this size that has such massive width and depth and effect to this community. Clearly, on behalf of the business community, our message is threefold. 1, establish a process that refines your search to internal candidates only. 2, execute the search with great intention and conclude it as early as February, at the end of this month, or but no later, spring break. And 3, establish the conditions, which provides a clear salary band expectation and initial contract term that you're willing to entertain for the superintendent of Palm Beach County Schools. When we think about those 3 things, we think about them because it is speed that will allow us to maintain our competitive advantage. Just as in the business community, speed is always an element to any great business transaction, so it must be here as well. Speed is not, to be slow in this process is not a friend to continuity, and is not a friend to the process. When you think about our internal candidates, one of our greatest opportunities as any organization is to mentor, train, coach leaders. You have done that. And you have trained leaders in this school system today that are ready to assume the helm of the superintendency and to continue the legacy that Dr. Ravosa and you have so clearly established through your strategic plan. And then finally, by setting clear expectations, you set the rules of the road. And by setting the rules of the road, you communicate a very clear message to the potential candidates of what your salary expectations will be, as well as what your contract term will be. Those are important elements in any decision-making process. So it is with that we applaud you for taking the steps to come today together at this school board meeting to address these important concerns. We ask for your deliberate focus and your swift execution to bring a conclusion to this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joe Asen, Ralph Arza, Renata Espinoza, Clemmy Christie.
Good afternoon, School Board, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Ravosa. My name is Joe Asen. I'm a resident of the city of Boca Raton, longtime school district employee, and a proud father of a daughter who graduated from Spanish River High School and is now in her second year at University of South Florida in Tampa. So thank you very much. I am now, I consider myself a charter school stakeholder at this time, and I wanted to present or address the issue of some of the misinformation and the equity issues surrounding charter schools. And this is not just specific to Palm Beach County, but this is happening across the nation in several states. And there's a lot of interesting things going on. We can all agree that the lawmakers of Florida have done a great job of disrupting K-12 public education when it comes to school choice in the state of Florida. Their laws have put us at odds with each other, even within departments within the school districts across the country, and even at the state level with the Department of School Choice and the charter school departments. Presently, there are two sides to the coin. The district folks are saying, you're taking our kids, you're depleting our budgets, you're stealing all of our knowledge students, our high-level performing students. And then on the other side, you have the charter schools saying, the money is not following the students, especially federal funds. And then in the middle, you've got departments like the Department of Choice and the Department of Charter Schools at the state level and the district level who act as referees and get in the middle of this. And this is not a healthy scenario. So what I'm suggesting is, what can we do? We can certainly do better for all our children in Palm Beach County. And I would like the board to consider to include an interview question for the incoming new superintendent on something on the lines of how he or she would ensure equity and foster collaboration for all the students of Palm Beach County, including the 20,500 students we currently have in charter schools in Palm Beach County. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Espinoza.
I thought I was going to get
Or
4
Mr.
minutes,
Arza.
not 3. Oh, okay.
Yep. Mr. Arza.
Can you start the clock again? Thank you. Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be here. If I could just say that over the past 2.5 years, I think that we have enjoyed a great relationship, and I represent different interests in this community, from Glades Academy and Pahokee to other interests. And it's been a pleasure to work with the superintendent. He's been an honorable man. We have disagreed, we've competed, but it's been in an honorable way. With many of the board members here, he would not be here, and the success that Palm Beach has enjoyed would not have taken place if you would not have selected him. So the first kudos to you for making that first decision. And you know, you pulled the rabbit out of the hat once. I'm sure you'll pull the rabbit out of the hat twice. I'm a resident of Palm Beach County. You know, I grew up in Miami. I love Miami, but I've been here 10 years. I have 2 homes now, one in Karen Brill's district and then one in your district, you know, Ms. McQuinn. And I should be moving there in the next couple weeks. But I would just say to you that contrary to popular belief, there has been a good relationship between charter schools, and you have been more than fair. We disagree on some things, and we have not stood in the way of you challenging those things that you as constitutional officers believe that you have a right to challenge, and we've respected that in the media. There has been a good relationship, and I hope we can continue that. My daughter attended schools here in Palm Beach County. She goes, Dad, you believe in school choice, so I choose to go to a traditional public school. And she had some great experiences. And you have some great dedicated teachers that impacted my daughter's life. And I'm thankful for that. I would just hope when you look outside, sometimes we get caught up in the weeds, but you guys have an opportunity to pick a leader. I think that leader should come from within your ranks. I think you have very talented people. I've had a chance to interact with these people. And it's, you know, there's healthy tension at times, and it's good to have healthy tension, but we have enjoyed a very good relationship. And I wish you, you know, Godspeed in making that decision. We will be reaching out to you to discuss certain things with you as we move forward. But I am confident that you will make the right decision for the children of this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
The CTA guy had 4 minutes. Well, I want to say good afternoon, school board members, Dr. Avosa. My name is Renata Espinoza, and I wanted to say on behalf, I wear many hats in Palm Beach County, but today I'm wearing a hat on an educational advisory board for the Village of Royal Palm. We want to thank Dr. Avosa so much for coming out to our village and to be talking to us about the K through 12 continuum and how it's helping with the teachers, the parents, the students, and we appreciate that you educated our board, and we want it to be continued to going through this. So we thank you, Dr. Avosa, and our board appreciate everything you've done with our Western communities. This is to the school board members. We really want you to think about to have something internal when you're looking for the next superintendent. You have fabulous candidates, fabulous people that work in here at Palm Beach County School District, people that have started as a teacher to an assistant to a director that has done many wonderful things and knowing about data and worked underneath Dr. Avosa and his leadership. And we really, in our Western community, we really want someone, he or she, to continue the good work that Dr. Avosa has been doing for this county, for Palm Beach County School District, but especially someone that's internal. We really don't want you to look for someone that's out national, someone's inside. And that would speak out more to your parents, to your teachers, to the people here in Palm Beach County. That would speak more and heavy and the people looking at you. So please try to consider to look for someone that's in-house, please. We would really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Christie.
Clemmy Christie, representing the Education Advisory Board for the Village of Royal Palm Beach. I want to thank you guys for having us out and letting you know how much we support you. Monday night we had a chance to bring up this whole issue, and one of my concerns is that we look into creating in our 5-year plan the contract saying something to the words of any bonus will be tied to the end of that plan, not paid out prior to that, but that a candidate will know that this is contingent upon them remaining in the job. Also, we are really big on us staying internal. Dr. Avosa made a point of saying when he was being interviewed about what a great team we had here, and I know he's also brought in his own team and everything, but it also shows just how much we think of Palm Beach County. We've educated our students here. We have teachers and principals who are here who have done a great job. Let's reward them. Let's show them that we support Palm Beach County. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes our speakers, so we'll move to the agenda. And board, normally we would have taken everybody's comments, but while I was having computer problems, it was easier to go ahead and get that. So I'd like to start with the board comments, and then after everyone's had a chance, go over what we've worked on as far as the items we need to discuss today. So, Mrs. McQuinn.
I just want to take a minute to thank all of I really mean this now, the phone calls, the emails, the texts from so many people who care about our leadership. I have not responded back to everyone, but that's not for lack of effort. I simply ran out of time. But I do appreciate your taking the time. Anyone who, I will continue reading everything as we go through the process, but I want to thank you for your input.
Mrs. Whitfield.
I just want to reiterate Mrs. McQuinn's statement, and I thank you all so much for coming here today. It's really heartening to know how much this means to the community. I believe our superintendent is the most important job we have in all of Palm Beach County. Nothing matters more than education of our students and the framing of our community. So I want to thank you all so much for your interest, and I am hoping that we do a great job for you today and in the month coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. So I'm going to use my comment time to jump right in and make my comments about the superintendent search. So I realize that I am the perpetual optimist because I believe with every challenge comes opportunity. And I truly believe that we have the opportunity now to show how strong this community is and how strong our school district is. Like you, I've been deep in thought over the past week about how we should proceed with selecting Dr. Avosa's replacement. My initial knee-jerk reaction was that we have to go outside the district because that's how we found Dr. Avosa. But then I began to think further. We are in a very different place from where we were when Dr. Avosa was hired. Over the past 2.5 years, a strategic plan was put in place, a roadmap that has guided us to success. Yes, we have achieved great success, and we are continuing to better ourselves. Dr. Avosa has also cultivated great leaders at all different levels of the district, and he is leaving a footprint that they can follow. If we go outside the district, the next superintendent would likely unravel or undo the work that has been accomplished over the past few years. I don't want to see that happen. So my desire is for us to do an internal search. Ideally, I would like the next superintendent to begin shadowing Dr. Avosa, working side by side with him, and also for the new superintendent to have an opportunity to go out into the community with Dr. Avosa and to be introduced, to be socialized. One thing I do not want to do this afternoon is to sit here on this dais nominating candidates to interview. What I would like us to do, though, is to set a process for applications to be submitted, to set a salary range, and I'll throw out my suggestion of $250,000 to $275,000 for someone inside the district, since they don't bring the same level of experience to us, to set a term for the contract, because applicants should know the initial contract length before they apply. My suggestion would be 3 years. And to set a schedule. We have a meeting next Wednesday, and then March 7th and 14th. I would hope that we would be able to review the applications at our next board meeting on February 21st. I'd like to see us announce our next superintendent before spring break. That is, by this time next month. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for one of our emerging leaders to take the helm of the school district of Palm Beach County, knowing that the school board is ready to support them and work with them. I'm excited to meet with the individuals we interview, and I look forward to all our constituencies helping us welcome the next leader of our school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barbieri.
Yeah, I echo Mrs. McQuinn. I appreciate all the input I've gotten. I'm sure Verizon is happy that I have not an unlimited data plan because they made a lot of money this month. I'm going to wait to make my comments on the superintendent search at the appropriate time and let the chairman take the lead on the agenda item as it's been put on the agenda rather than taking up my time now. So thank you.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate all the concerns, the questions, the phone calls, the discussions that I had with so many stakeholders over the last week. I really do appreciate it because I think it is a collaborative process for all of us and talking about what the next steps are as we select our superintendent. But I, too, like Mrs. Brill, would like to kind of start my process about what I think early. So if you can hear me, I have some just ideas for our board as well as what my personal thoughts are. Today we began to discuss the steps we will take as we begin the process of finding a replacement for our superintendent of schools. Most of us have been through this process before right here on this board. As we work together today and the weeks to come, we must remember several things. Finding an effective superintendent to collaborate with us as part of the governance team is paramount to our success. This is one of the most important decisions we make as a board. We cannot rush to make this decision. Each board member needs to be heard today and throughout the process. We will be thoughtful and respectful. As we begin to talk about the process of a local or national search, our process must be fair, above board, transparent, and with utmost integrity. I have been contacted by our professional support organizations and associations, the Florida School Boards Association as well as the Council of Great City Schools. Both are willing to support us as we begin this process. Our dues provide for us the support from these associations. And the objective is to make sure that our process is very clean, pure, and it's crucial that we do not make any mistakes. This could be a legal problem for us if we do not follow a clean process. So having the process overlooked by our professional associations is a good thing. Only the board will vote on the next superintendent, and I do believe the stakeholders have input in this process. I am very interested in looking at internal candidates as we look for excellence right here in our district. We do have this excellence. We continue to have turnover at the superintendent's level over the last few years. I'm looking for someone who is committed to Palm Beach County and committed to this strategic plan. That's really important to me. As I've spoken to all of you, many from the different regions of Palm Beach County, I know that we're in good shape. And we have our own successful leaders that started out in teaching positions that moved up to the top level of leadership. So a short internal search can lead to what we need here in Palm Beach County. And if we have our own Florida School Board Association overlook this process with very little cost to us because we are associated with this association, this will help us to look very objective in the process. As you know, a full-blown search can last for months. With that approach, we would have to consider hiring an interim superintendent. I'm eager today to begin the discussions as we begin to talk about our next steps in hiring an internal candidate for the school district of Palm Beach County. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson.
I'll leave my comments for the agenda item.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on the agenda. The next item is the approval of the consent agenda. Is there any item anybody does want to pull? If not, is there a motion to approve consent? Motion by Mr. Barbieri, second by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call a question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So that moves us to new business. Mark Mitchell has come forward and is our facilitator through HR and some of the process. So let me very briefly share. Over the last week or so, I've had probably 4 or 5 meetings with Ms. Rico, Mrs. Bass, Mr. Mitchell, and Ms. Schuyler to review the process that we went through before and looked at the issues that we needed to address. And we asked that the agenda item that would be put on today would allow the board to actually make some decisions, because if we just had discussion, we wouldn't get any place today. So there are 5 items I'd like for us to address today, and some of them I think just from hearing some of the comments probably will be easier than others to go through. So the first one is to make a decision whether or not we want to do an internal or external search. The second item is a possible timeline. And obviously, if it's an internal search, and I believe that Mrs. Bass sent you a tentative outline of one of them was identical almost to what we did in the last search. The other one would expedite the time for internal, create a salary range and the contract term, and then deal with the issues of questions. And I think the one speaker who gave us, I think, one item that can certainly be considered. So at this time, if the board doesn't object, what I like to do is work through each one of those items and see where we are. The first item is internal versus external search. Mrs. Whitfield.
I would just like to make a motion that we go for an internal candidate. I think that is the consensus that I'm hearing around the community and from the members that have spoken so far. So possibly we could expedite this, but I do think that we have some great talent here in Palm Beach County, and I'd love that to be.
Is there a second? Motion by Dr. Robinson and Mrs. Andrews. So any discussion on this? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mark, I think you have a lot easier job to do after that one. The
Thank you,
next
Mr.
item
Shaw.
is timeline. So the second column in the timeline that was sent out, you can ignore because that would have required a whole different amount of time. So the timeline that we have for everybody reflected a couple thoughts, and I'll turn it over to Mark to run through what we might be able to do. But the benchmarks that we have, number one is to decide the time that people have to apply. Give them a certain number of days to do the application, and then as Mrs. Brill said in her comments, the next step would be for us to shortlist the candidates and choose the finalists, allow an identified number of days for board members to have one-on-one conversations with each one of the candidates, as well as any other conversations that the candidates might have, and then for us to come back and interview the candidates and then finally make a decision. And that timeline, Mark, I'll turn it over to you to give some possible dates to consider.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Shaw, and good afternoon, Board. I believe you all have the draft discussion document with the internal search steps. I thought if it pleases the Board, the process we might go through here is to talk about the steps first, and then if we are okay with the steps, then we can attach some dates to that. Is that okay? Okay. First stage is discussing the search parameters and the Board providing direction, as Mr. Shaw stated, on those various items, and picking the application go live date and how long you want that to be posted and so forth internally. The next phase would be HR will put together the books of the candidates, all their, I assume, cover letter and resumes for each board member, same way we did last time. You review the materials, gather any input you want and so forth, and then shortlist the candidates, right? Following that setup, we assume you'd want one-on-one interviews of those. We can set those up like we did previously, having a kind of round-robin type of event in various meeting rooms. And then the public interviews with the board and the selection of the finalists. Following that, negotiating contract terms, coming back with the contract, talking about any transitions. So we see those as the major buckets of work. If those are agreeable, we can start to attach dates to those.
Questions? Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. I like this, but I had said in my opening remarks, we do have a Florida School Boards Association that can provide some support to our HR department without a big cost to us. It covers our costs for being a member of the association. They're willing to come here. The Chief Executive Officer had advised us that she could come today or can come whenever we want her to look over this process. It's important to me that this process is clean and clear to everyone, and it is being looked at by an outside entity, which is related to us through our association. The Chief Executive Officer said it would not cost any more than travel to come here and work with our school district HR, communications department, and legal department to make sure everything flows smoothly. So I'm asking this board if that could be something that we can include into this process that we're doing today. And the second part of this process is that I'd like to see a piece where we can have some community input.
Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. And although I have great regard for the Florida School Board Association, I think since we're talking about interviewing internal candidates, I really don't think that we need their input. I think we have excellent people in our HR department. I think that, we're going to know the candidates. It's a little bit different. It will be very transparent. I think it will be, we can certainly make sure that all of the processes are in place, but I just think that that would unnecessarily extend the period of time. And, we're all hearing names, we're hearing interests. I really don't think that it's necessary to spend the time having the School Board Association involved.
Mr. Barbieri?
I agree with Mrs. Brill. I believe our staff has been through this quite a few times in the last years. I don't think we need any coaching from an outside entity to help us. I appreciate the offer from FSBA. They are a great organization and they've helped us in the past, but I don't believe it's necessary at this time to bring them in. My comment.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you. And it's not about the process of actually having done it before. It's just about the clarity of it, questions that may come up later, and having an extra resource available to say that they've actually looked at our process and can deem that we have done the things that we're supposed to do just helps us to be a lot more clearer and cleaner through the process.
Any other comments? We need a motion to establish the timeline, or to, if anybody would like to address the request from Mrs. Andrews, we need to approve that. Mr. Barbieri.
I move that we do not bring anybody in from the outside, and that we let our internal staff handle the process.
Motion by Mr. Barbieri, second by Mrs. Brill. Any discussion? We'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 6-1 with Mrs. Andrews voting against. So we'll move forward with the timelines, and you want to share with them the dates you want to attach to some of these. And I think the same as we did with the search for Dr. Avosa, we have time. So if something happens during that, these are our targeted dates that we can tentatively say this is what we want to operate on, and if something comes up, we can always adjust it. Because if Mr. Barbieri had mentioned spring break is the time, and same thing for Mrs. Brill, we've got time until spring break with some meeting times to do it. So, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. The first question, I think, as far as the timeline goes, is we're ready to post the job tomorrow, if that's the board's will. And the question then becomes, how long do you want to post it for? And just for the record, we'll be working with our Director of Recruitment and Retention, who's behind me, Ms. Gail Williams. We'll be working together, and with her staff as well during this process. So you will have the full HR staff looking over this process. But that's the first question. If you're okay to post starting tomorrow morning, and then how long you'd like it open for?
Mrs. Whitfield and Mr. Barbieri.
I just wanted to ask a question. What is the shortest amount of time that would be effective? Because I don't want to be ineffective, but I feel like everyone who wants to apply for this position is in the room right now, so we don't really need to do a huge advertising process. So a couple of days?
Exactly. To what we had talked about, it opens tomorrow, Thursday. We could close it Friday afternoon at 3 p.m.
Okay. Thank you. I would move for that if I could.
All right. Hold off on the motion, if you will, until we get whenever you have a chance. Mr. Barbieri.
I know that sounds quick, but as Mrs. Senior moments, they happen more and more anymore. As Mrs. Whitfield said, everybody that's going to apply is either in this room, or I'm sure they're watching from wherever they're at today. I think we post it tomorrow. We close Friday. Mr. Mitchell, if you can get the notebooks over the weekend put together, it requires a little overtime. I'm sure the superintendent will authorize the overtime and get that to us by Monday, so that the board can start looking at the applicants by Monday.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments? So Mrs. Whitfield will entertain your motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we open the application process tomorrow and close by 3 p.m. on Friday.
All right. Could we modify the 3
You want it
p.m.
to be
to the
5?
close of business day, just to
About
give them
midnight?
that
You want
extra
midnight?
couple hours? All right. So
Okay, 5 p.m. Thank
All right,
you.
second by Mr. Barbieri. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Next item is salary range. We heard a couple people mention salaries. In our discussions, Mr. Mitchell and Mrs. Bass have done some research and looked at a salary range that was competitive throughout the state. And since we're now talking only about the state, we had that. And the salary ranges that we had in there ranged, the range would be probably appropriate. Anywhere between 250 and 300 would give us some room in there. So I'd like to suggest that we at least start discussions with that. Mrs. Brill?
Okay, I move that we present a salary range of $250,000 to $300,000.
Second by Mr. Barbieri. Any questions? We'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Next item, contract term. Now, I didn't get my senior moment, but I can't talk anymore. Contract term, Mr. Barbieri.
Unless other board members want to speak, I'll hold my motion, but I believe we should go for a 5-year contract. We were hoping to keep Dr. Vosa for 5 years. I hope the next one we pick will stay the full 5 years, so I would make a motion, unless the board members want to speak before I make a motion, that we enter into a contract with the new superintendent for 5 years.
All right, comments, or was that a second, Mrs. Brill, or question? Mrs. Brill and then Mrs. McQuinn.
I'm okay with 5 years. I was really leaning towards 3 years, and we could always revisit it the second year because we are going to be elevating a person who's never been in that role before. And, you know, my expectation is we'll provide all of the tools and supports that that person's going to need to be successful, but I'm just a little more comfortable since it's somebody that's not walked in those shoes before going with 3 years.
Mrs. McQuinn?
I also prefer a 3-year, but I would love to hear from my colleagues who have rationale for 5.
Mr. Barbieri?
What if we had a 5-year contract with at the end of 3 years, either party can cancel without any penalties on 90 days notice or 6 months notice, whatever the board feels? I just think for stability purposes, we don't want to be going through this again in 3 years. I mean, none of us want to go through it right now when we're going through it. So, you know, I'm hoping that the next superintendent will stay 5 years. So if we just have an out at 3 years, but with that way the community knows we have a 5-year superintendent in place.
All right. Mrs. Andrews, did you want to ask a question? Mrs. Andrews.
I definitely think the 5 years would be very good because we've just had tremendous turnover. We haven't had anyone here for 5 years in a long time. So I think we really need to try to make sure that we can entice someone when they're interviewing with us that this is part of the process, that we do expect you to stay for 5 years. But I like the idea of having the part where after 3 years, there's no harm to anybody and they can be let go.
Okay. Mrs. Brill?
Thank you. And we're all working so well together that I now withdraw my suggestion of 3 years. I'll go with the 5 years and go along with what Mr. Barbieri said.
All right, and I want to call on Ms. Rico, because there is a statutory thing that does fall into this that probably will help answer some of our question on this one.
Thank you, and I just want the board to recall that there is a no fault termination in the contract for basically any time. So rather than, you know, calling it at 3 years, I don't know if that's something that you know, if you want to consider that, but any time during one of these contracts, you will have an opportunity to do a no fault cancellation.
If I could, Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Barbieri.
I thought in the contract provisions we've had in the past that if we canceled before the term ends, that there was some buyout required or some payout required that takes them through the end of the contract. I just don't want to get in a situation where we owe anybody anything after 3 years if the board decides to cancel the contract, so that there's nobody entitled to any deferred salaries or anything else.
Right, so the negotiations on that would be, you know, interesting because you basically have a 3-year contract.
That's what we pay you a lot of money for, so.
Right, so I just, you know, but you basically have a 3-year contract at that stage if there's no severance at that point.
Mrs. Whitfield.
I was just going to ask Dr. Avosa, did the difference between 3 and 5 years mean anything to you when you were looking for a job?
It's a good question.
I'm anxious to see how you answer this one, Dr. Bosa.
You work at the will of the board, and the buyout in Florida is about 20 weeks, which is probably the shortest in the country. So there's always a risk involved in taking a position in Florida. Most school systems, the board would be required to complete the entire contract. But I think that law changed in 2011. The 5-year really is about a commitment. It's symbolic in most ways. And I think it's an important benefit for the community.
Right. Any other comments? And just to make sure, Ms. Rico, the 20 weeks payout is statutory, so that would,
yes,
no matter what we have, that would be the max.
It's actually 22 weeks by statute, but what I'm essentially saying is if you have a 3-year, no severance, no payout, go away clause, you essentially have a 3-year contract. And so you're really looking at a 3-year contract.
What if we had an automatic extension of 2 years at the end of the 3 years unless it's canceled by either party? So that unless we take affirmative action, it'll continue for another.
Something along those lines.
Right. If I'll put in, that's what I was going to suggest is we do 3 years with just an automatic extension, the same as we've done, which would keep that continuity and I think deal with what Dr. Avosa said about the good faith and commitment. Mrs. Brill, and then Dr. Robinson.
Okay, if I may suggest that Mr. Barbieri work with our general counsel on the the way the contract gets structured, I think that will take care of it.
Dr. Robinson.
So I'm working really hard to listen and not speak, but you just said something that made me have a flashback about an automatically renewing contract, which I can't live with. I'm going to just tell you now, I can't live with automatic renewing contracts.
Okay. All right. So we need a motion so we have some idea what to vote on at this point, because we've kind of been around the table now. Mrs. Whitfield.
I'd like to make a motion that we just have a 5-year contract.
Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 5 are questions.
5-2? You said 5-0, Mr. Shaw.
Oh, 7-0. I was still on the 5. 7-0. Motion carries unanimously. Item number 5 are questions. I'd like to ask that the board, each one of us, develop a question that they could get to Mark that we would like to ask during the public meeting, and just so that, and the reason so that Mark has a chance and legal to go through and make sure that the questions that we're asking meet all of the legal requirements. Submit that, but then allow at the board meeting, if people want to do follow-up, you could. But this would give that consistency that we've had in the past of asking each candidate the same question and allowing then follow-up for board members. Mrs. Brill?
I'm sorry, did you say that the questions that you want us to submit are the ones for the public?
The public meeting.
Okay,
yeah.
because we do have some questions that were asked in the past, and, you know,
Right.
I think that we could, at the next meeting, ask Mr. Mitchell to bring us some suggested questions. We have them already here.
Right.
What we did before, and have us cull through them and add anything that we want at that
Yeah.
time.
This is only if there's something, because I think, didn't you get in your packet the copy of the old questions? So, and that probably covers most of it. So, if there's not objection, then we'll let Mark come back with some suggested questions. Are there any other items we need to discuss at this point, Dr. Robinson?
Just to follow up on the comment about community input, I didn't hear us explore that, and I mean, so I've already gotten requests for essentially town hall meeting formats, but I think that we do need to include that in our timeline.
Is this after we've shortlisted the candidates
I think
for
it would
them
be
to meet
after.
them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think we need to start outlining it.
All right. Comments? I see some heads shake on that to try to schedule. Mrs. McQuinn.
It's my understanding, I'm not opposed to input. We all know that. But it is my understanding as a start that, and I believe we have it, is that because Dr. Avosa's, the input for his position has been so recent, that at least we start from there, taking the input from some of the groups we already have, unless they want to put forward that they've changed their mind about something. Because you got extensive input in the recent search.
Mrs. Brill and Mr. Barbieri.
Thank you, and I know some of the constituencies are already starting to meet with the names that are out there, so I think once we have the pool of candidates, I would certainly, I'm not opposed to input, as Mrs. McQuinn said, but I think that the constituencies can certainly reach out, that maybe we allow time for them to reach out and come back to us, because I'm sure all of you have gotten the number of calls that I've gotten already getting input, so I don't know that we really need a formal venue. I think that we should just let the candidates avail themselves, or the community avail themselves of the candidates and get back to us, because most of these people are going to be known to most of them.
Right. Mr. Barbieri and then Mrs. Andrews.
Well, you know, the problem with structured community town hall meetings is it extends the time period. We went through an extensive, I mean, thousands of people gave us input only 2.5 years ago. We have a strategic plan in place that was part of that whole process. We'll be following that strategic plan, or the next superintendent won't get the job unless he agrees to follow the strategic plan. So, you know, and like Mrs. Brill said, we're all getting calls. If groups out there want to speak with the 3 people we shortlisted, if we get them down to 3 people, then certainly they'll have the opportunity to call those people, and I'm sure those people will be more than willing to meet with whatever groups want them to speak with. So I am not in favor of the board sanctioning any town hall meetings, because if we do it in one district, we have 6 other ones to do it in, and every one of us is going to get calls from constituents about why are we having a town hall meeting in Jupiter when we should be having one in Boca. It just extends the process, and I think it's needless based on the fact that we just went through this process. We have thousands of comments, and we spent hundreds of, if not thousands of dollars on getting the input we needed to determine who should be superintendent of this county, and that's not changed in my opinion. So I would not be in favor of any board-sanctioned town hall meetings.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and I know that we're pushing quickly with this fast timeline, but I still do believe there's some people that may not have called or may not have the opportunity to do the kinds of things that we're saying that has happened already. I've received a lot of input so far, but I know there's more out there that want to have a part in this. One of the pieces we did before is we had something right here at this district, or even in the West area, I think, in 2 locations where people could come and meet the candidates and have some input. I think there can be an abridged kind of setting where we can have the people that truly want to come and meet and have some input have it. And I think you're going to have a lot of people already doing it because they have access, but some people don't. And we've got to make sure that we reach out to them and that we're not in that much of a hurry to get this done, that we don't invite them the opportunity to participate.
Dr. Robinson and then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. So I am in a hurry. I mean, I don't want to waste time, but I also want us to get it right. And to your point, Mrs. Andrews, there are some people who have access, who are empowered, who pick up the phone and call, right? There's some people who will call all of us. There's some people who will send emails. There's some people who will reach out to the candidates. But there's some people who don't feel that they have such a voice and who have children in our school system. And sanction or not, I'm going to make every attempt to hear from them, as I have done in the past. I hope that I don't have to create another rubric, but I will listen to people who really have the largest vested interest in our decision.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. I am definitely in a rush as well. I want this to happen, but this is one thing that gives me pause, because I know that this is going to be my superintendent, but it's also going to be your superintendent and yours and yours and yours. And so I want you to believe in this person as much as you believed in Dr. Avosa when we brought him on, because that was amazing. The community support behind him was because people had an opportunity to have some sort of a conversation with him. So what I was going to propose is maybe what we could do is, in our process, once we get to a place where we feel we have the top candidates that we're going to be looking at, possibly we could just hold a week open so that there could be opportunities for organizations to meet with the candidates that are out there, so that they could have their moments to talk with them. And then if the community does feel that they need to have one meeting here where we could invite people, we could do that, but I don't really know how that would work fairly. So, but I think we should have a space in there for the community to have their moment with the candidates.
Mr. Barbieri and then Dr. Robinson.
Let Dr. Robinson go first.
Okay, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. I think maybe I'm envisioning something different. I have no objection if we can work it out without delaying the process to have the candidates available to the public, if you will. What I know is that my constituents trust me to hear them and then to manifest that knowledge in my vote. And so that's why I think it's important that at least I go to the community again. I don't think I'm gonna hear anything different than I heard last time, but I still must listen, and I intend to, right? Just in case, and then to manifest that in my vote. So I think we're maybe visualizing 2 different things. I mean, I could actually start what I'm talking about tomorrow, right? Whether or not the candidates are available to the public, I think that might be icing on the cake, but I do think that we must consider, without delaying the timeline, how we hear and how we hear from essentially the voiceless.
Mr. Barbieri.
I think we're all in agreement. I mean, all of us want to hear from our constituents. I mean, I have 21 schools in my district. I make it a point to get to as many SAC and PTA meetings at those schools as I possibly can, so I constantly am hearing from teachers, principals, assistant principals, and parents. Certainly, you know, I think all of us agree that we want to hear from our constituents. If we can just, you know, once the names of the people are released, I mean, if Mr. Mitchell, if you have to work another 4 or 5 days into the timeline to give board members the chance to talk to people in their communities, you know, because at that point, I mean, we've been getting, I probably have 500 or 600, you know, emails, text messages, phone calls in just the last 6 days. So I'm sure once it gets down to 2 or 3 people, it's going to continue. I mean, anybody that wants to get to, you know, maybe we should publicize the phone number for the board office again, prominently saying if you want to talk to your board member, here's his name and here's his number. I mean, most people have my cell number, so I think we're all talking the same thing. I just don't want to extend, I don't want to extend the process by scheduling, and maybe I'm misunderstood. I don't want to schedule meetings in different areas of the district because that's going to extend the timeline. There's no way to get those done with 7 of us having a meeting in each one of our districts. So,
I think I hear consensus on what Mr. Barbieri said. Just a couple things that I'd like to ask us to do, and this is a sunshine issue, is that if somebody's having a meeting that you're going to be with a group, please let the board office know so it can be calendared so that in the event that another board member was to show up there are no questions about access and everything. So to summarize where we are, we made the decisions and on internal candidate, the timeline Mark will work with trying to set up the specific dates that are tentative. Salary range $250 to $300, contract term 5 years. Mark will come back to us with questions that we'll have for that. And anything that we've missed. Mrs. McQuinn and Mrs. Brill.
I'm going to need advice on where I want to go with this. So let me just ask the question and you can tell me it doesn't belong here. We have not had the discussion about a temporary, an interim superintendent. With all of, there has been huge distraction in the last week and a half. So I don't know when we do it, but I would like to have some talk about having an interim appointee.
Ms. Rico and I have had that conversation, and I had the conversation with Dr. Vosa, and as soon as we identify a candidate, then we will be meeting to make whatever recommendation to the board on a specific time for resignation and start time for the new superintendent, and then anything else that the board wants to deal with on that. But I think we can't do it right now because there's just a lot of things that I think are impacting. Mrs. Brill and then back to Mrs. McQuinn.
And I think that, see, my vision is that they work together for the period of time that remains, or at least have the opportunity for Dr. Avosa to take the person out to the community, to the different meetings that he goes to. So I don't know if you mean interim to me means like very temporary for long term. So I don't know, maybe we're thinking the same thing, but I'm not prepared to appoint an interim person.
All right, Mr. Barbieri, at first, since our rules say everybody gets a chance before you get back.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about disruption. I mean, to take the superintendent out of his position and put an interim in there while we're making a decision on the next superintendent, that's disruption. What I envision is what Mrs. Brill is suggesting. I hope Dr. Vosa will agree. Well, I guess you don't have any choice. You have to stay until we tell you to leave. You got 6 months otherwise. So, I mean, I'm hoping that whoever we pick as a new superintendent is actually assigned to Dr. Vosa's office and works with Dr. Vosa as our superintendent for a couple months to make sure that they're both in the same place so that when Dr. Vosa walks out the door, the next superintendent is up to speed on every single thing that's been going on in this district. So if that takes 2 months, 3 months, 6 weeks, whatever the two of them decide they need, I think that's the interim situation I'm looking at, is this person is pulled out of their current position in the district and works with Dr. Vosa for some period of time to make sure they're both up and running at the same speed when Dr. Vosa leaves.
Mrs. McQuinn.
Okay, I'm not going to just let this go. I want to have the discussion. When you said that you have spoken with General Counsel, and I can't remember who else, I don't know about that, and I really want to understand this. And if I don't, a lot of the public doesn't understand. An interim to me means I'm giving an example, I'm not giving a suggestion. We have a deputy superintendent who absolutely knows, if a principal's off a campus, I have an assistant principal who can still continue the work of the school. If I'm at a regional level, I have someone who can continue the work of the region. No one person for a finite amount of time is indispensable. The work can still go on. So I don't know what conversations have taken place that I don't understand yet. I see an interim who is on our current staff, not on our staff, but on the district staff, who could very well step into a position. I don't know that I agree with the person. It depends who it is, who's a superintendent, automatically saying that we're going to have them shadow our current superintendent. That depends upon who the person is. So I'm not there yet, and I understand, and I'm not telling you that I'm going to be a lone dissenting vote. I need to understand why we are so unwilling to have someone temporarily take the helm, who is working with us and who plans to continue working with us.
All right, Dr. Robinson, Mr. Barbieri, and then Ms. Rico, you want to turn in first?
Speak first? Okay, sure. So I'm happy to speak to the issue of the contract. Right now, the law requires one superintendent at a time. So you currently have a superintendent who's under contract with you. The resignation date was identified as June 12th, 10th, something around that. And so at the point in time when the board it was a little premature to get that conversation before when you're going to have a decision about that overlap or how that's going to intersect. So at that point in time, it's totally appropriate. I understand the superintendent has reached out to the board by email to indicate that he'll be coming forward to talk about the contract resolution. And then, I'm also happy to put something out by memo to the board and speak with you each one-on-one, and then have that item as an agenda item coming forward. So there's no mystery to it. There's an exit procedure. There's some monies that would be due to the superintendent representing his vacation pay and sick days, and some other adjustments, and it's all laid out in the contract. So it's going to be pretty simple. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of mystery or complication there, but it's just premature to have the board undertake that vote in consideration at this juncture, in my opinion.
Okay. Dr. Vosa.
Yeah, I just want to add some clarity. So if the board decided today that I leave tomorrow, that certainly is the board's pleasure and option. It would just require that, because my resignation is June 12th, that the board continue to compensate me through June 12th. If the board wants me to work through June 12th or whatever the full 180 is, I forgot, I think it's maybe August 1 or somewhere in that area, that's the board's decision. So I think that's where you were headed. I could be wrong, but if the board chooses to tell me to leave tomorrow, you have the right to do so. And my obligation is to continue working with the board until y'all make that decision.
All right, Mr. Barbieri, Dr. Robinson, and Mrs. Brill.
I'm sorry, Mr. McQuinn. I usually agree with you. I give you a lot of credit. You've been in the district for many, many years before I was here. But my perception of when we need as an interim is when we're under a deadline where we have a current superintendent that's going to be vacating, or we have a current superintendent that we don't think is doing a good job, and we want to get rid of that superintendent immediately and get somebody in interim until we find a replacement. In this case, we just gave Dr. Vosa an outstanding evaluation. We all believe, and I think the entire community believes, he's been a great superintendent. He's willing to work with us to stay as long as we want him to stay. Certainly, he's got to stay for the 6 months unless we let him out of the contract early. Again, I think, and you're right, depending on who we pick for the new superintendent, so one person may be much more up to speed on what's been going on in the superintendent's office than another. So I think we have to look at that situation once we decide on who it's going to be, and then negotiate with Dr. Vosa how long to stay, so that there's some overlap in the new person, and not giving him the title of superintendent at that point, but he's the designee that will be entering into contract with when Dr. Vosa leaves, and give them the overlap. But I just don't see I think there'd be total disruption in this district to say, goodbye, Dr. Vosa, we're going to put an interim in here. Even if it's Dr. Christensen, the deputy, who would be the likely one to take over if Dr. Vosa, God forbid, should be in an accident and can't come to work tomorrow. But, I mean, what's the point when we have a great superintendent that's here and willing to stay until we have a new superintendent in place? So I'll stop speaking on it and let the rest of you decide what you want.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Barbieri. The other thing is, some of us will recall we had a bad experience with the interim superintendent. And so I think part of the conversation is about transition as opposed to interim. I think that no matter who becomes superintendent, there has to be a transition period. No one knows everything that Dr. Vosa has been doing. I mean, that's just true. It's massive, right? So there has to be a transition, but I would not be at all supportive of an interim. And if for some horrible reason we found ourselves suddenly without Dr. Vosa, we would have to recall the lessons learned from the previous experience with the interim superintendent and have I don't know how you can do belts and suspenders to say the interim can't apply, but we've had that experience already. I'm not interested in reliving it. But fortunately, we're not in a position that we need to really talk about it because we have a timeline that gets it all done way before June 12th.
Mrs. Brill.
Thank you, and I'm just going to echo Mr. Barbieri and Dr. Robinson. I'm afraid I don't agree on the interim. I don't have any interest in asking Dr. Avosa to leave early. He's doing a fantastic job. I also think that we need a smooth transition. And right now, we're all of the same mind. We're all working towards that. And what an opportunity for our next leader to be able to be side by side with someone who we have all said is a fabulous leader. So again, I also agree with Dr. Robinson. We've been that route with an interim, and I'm not going there again.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I just wanted to say that Mrs. McQuinn brings up a good point. We didn't actually even have a conversation about this, so I'm glad that we are having this conversation so that the public understands that even though Dr. Avosa has resigned, I still have full confidence in his work and the work that he has done so far and the work he will continue to do for us until we're able to find his replacement. I think he has been nothing but a gentleman and a professional in this position, and I'd like to keep him as long as possible. You know, if you want to say you want to stay right now, that's fine. You can totally do that. But in the interim, I have complete confidence in his work, and I would like him to stay through June 12th, if he will. Thank you.
Mrs. McQuinn.
I certainly did not expect that we would not have our superintendent tomorrow. I think that's a little far-reaching. I thought that we were looking, I thought we had a timeline that we are looking to have naming a replacement soon. That having been said, I'm going to wait. I'm new to this process, which is why I'm going to ask the questions. I'm not going to sit like the student in the class and not want to look stupid. I'm going to ask the questions. I respect the experience and the input from my colleagues. When do we move to the contract issue?
Ms. Rico, when should we address that one?
It would seem to me most appropriate to determine who your candidate is, and, you know, assuming you're going to get through this time frame, it looks like it's, Mr. Mitchell, is it like 3 weeks? Two more board meetings?
3 weeks or shorter. That we'll have one question when you guys finish this discussion. I think that will lead us to that
So
conclusion.
it's 2 or 3 more board meetings from now in sort of successive weeks, and so at that point in time, you'll know who your candidate is, and then I think the discussion about overlap, you know, solo flight, or which way you best deem the transition to occur, and perhaps at that point in time you can get some input from the new candidate as well as hearing from your constituency and Dr. Avosa in terms of the board's pleasure on that.
All right, any other questions? If not, is there a motion to adjourn this?
Mr. Shaw.
I think that's it. Mr. Mitchell.
If I may suggest we set one date, because I think it'll drive a lot of the community input, if we may, for when you'd like to shortlist, because the board, what I heard is the board will get your books of candidates Monday. We could shortlist as early as next Wednesday, the 21st, or we could shortlist on the 28th. If you pick that date, we can drive the rest of the calendar around it.
All right, the pleasure of the board on that one. Mr. Barbieri?
I move that we set next Wednesday as the day we shortlist, assuming you can get us the books by Monday with the candidates.
Motion by Mr. Barbieri, second by Mrs. Brill. Discussion. Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? All opposed? All right, so, Mr. Mitchell, I think we've got six items in for you to deal with.
Thank you.
So, is there a motion to adjourn the special meeting? Motion by Mr. Barbieri, second by Mrs. Whitfield. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. At this time, the board has a closed session on expulsions.